we're doing the Antichrist.
Yes, doing the
Nietzsche.
Antichrist.
This is our third installment of Nietzsche.
Yep.
So this will be in the 6.0.
Yeah.
This will
So
be
which
6.7.
translation are you reading?
It's the Penguin Classics version, and it's a double version. It's got the Twilight of the Idols in it, which is another great one.
Okay.
That we could.
My
read.
copy has Antichrist, Ecce Homo, and Twilight of the Idols.
Nice. Yeah, Ecce Homo is like his autobiography, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No. So in terms of what, so it's translated by J. Hollingdale.
Okay. Mine is Judith Norman, but it seems like the most famous translation is the H.L. Mencken.
Okay. Well, we're not. Neither one of us is reading that.
No, but I
How
did.
did you figure-
I did read the introduction by him.
He wrote an intro for your.
No, he wrote a
version.
different intro, but I found it.
Oh, okay.
Just
When
through
did
other
he
stuff.
do that translation?
I don't know.
Why don't you know everything about this?
I don't know. But in his introduction, it was he said something about how if you've read the rest of Nietzsche's works or sort of Nietzsche's body, nothing in this text should surprise you.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think that's why I like it, because it is such a succinct summary of so many of what he's written about. And, I don't think we were super confused by genealogy of morals, but it's kind of confusing.
Right.
And I think this really clarifies what he was saying.
Yeah, because H.L. Mencken talks about that, about how the genealogy of morals, this expands on the Christian aspect and the idea of, what is it? It's a philosophy of, what's the word he uses in genealogy of morals? Because he talks a lot about decadence in the Antichrist,
Yes.
but there's a different word he uses in genealogy of morals.
I think I know what you're talking about. Is it the hygiene of...
No. There's a word for it. It's like when you act petty.
Ressentiment?
Yes, resentment. Yes.
Yeah. You got to say it like it's French.
Right.
Come on.
It's a resentful philosophy.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and also, he expounds on what he means by beyond good and evil, which is one of his books, and Buddhism is beyond good and evil. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
But it's like, if you're gonna read Nietzsche, it's like the classic Nietzsche that I think exemplifies everything that he became. Because that's the other thing, is he wrote this was like, I don't know if it was the last thing he ever wrote, but it was, I think, the last thing published posthumously. Like,
that sounds right.
They held off publishing it,
Right.
and for like almost a decade or something, after he died. And it was because they were worried that it was too sort of inflammatory. And you could see why, because he basically, to summarize it, he's saying that Christianity is a self-hating ressentiment religion, and it's a slave morality. It's a religion for the masses, and it flips on its head.
Right.
I guess you could say the old morality, the morality of the ancients, which held up life-giving, or fulfilling things, whereas he looks at Christianity as bringing up life, not affirming things.
Right. It's nihilistic.
Yes, and it's about hating the instincts, and
Christianity bad.
Yes, basically. Yes.
Done.
Moralic acid.
Yeah.
I always like that.
Yep.
But so a few things I wanted to sort of, one of the reasons I wanted to read it was because I keep bringing it up when I'm talking about, like, when we just read Judith Butler. Oh, by the way, it's good. We're just doing an episode with you and me. It's good to talk to you.
Oh, yeah. Now that everyone else is gone.
Now that everybody else has got, we could get back to the Antichrist. Okay.
Yeah. Dionysus, right?
Dionysus. Yeah.
I guess that's giving away the ending, though.
Of Nietzsche?
Of the Antichrist. Of who the Antichrist is.
Well, is it Dionysus really? I guess it's Lucifer, right? Or whatever.
No. According to Nietzsche.
I don't think Nietzsche thinks that Dionysus is the Antichrist.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anyway.
Wait, no, I mean, go ahead. Maybe I missed
that. Comes later. I thought that he was essentially had defined it that, like, Dionysus is the exact opposite of Christ.
I don't know, because that would kind of make Apollo Christ, because he does a big thing about Dionysus and Apollo ethics.
Right.
Is it Beyond Good and Evil?
I don't know.
I think it might be. It's in one of the famous books. And it's not Genealogy of Morals, and I don't think it's The Will to Power. Or whatever. I think it's Beyond Good and Evil. But anyway, I don't think it falls on that.
Well, maybe it'll come up. This was part of a lecture I was listening to about it. So
maybe. I mean, again, I could be wrong, but that sounds like an oversimplification.
Well, I think it was like a broad strokes idea.
Yeah. Sure.
Anyway, we'll find out as we read. Maybe this person is totally wrong. I haven't read the whole thing yet. It's just some like lecture. I don't even remember.
Like, were they okay? Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's again, if somebody's claiming it, I mean, that's probably not off. I can kind of see how that could be the case, just because Dionysus is like, yeah, it's about fulfilling the whims and of your instincts and stuff, and drinking and becoming I guess uncontrolled. But that's the thing, is it's like the ancient morality was, I don't know, it was just the axes were different, I guess is what I'm getting at. Whereas
right.
Christianity changes the axes.
Mm-hmm.
And wasn't that one thing he was saying? It was good and bad, and then it became good and evil?
Maybe.
Like, it started as good and bad, and then it became good and evil. So there was like a switch that Christianity made.
Maybe.
But you're right. He also talks about how Christianity is basically it is turning on its head those that were raised up. Mm-hmm. So you would raise up the strong and like the Herculeans and whatnot, and you would not aspire to be like the weak or the sickly. And
so I think I don't know what we call it, section 2, thesis 2.
Yeah, whatever, yeah.
I think that sums it up pretty well. What is good? Everything that enhances people's feeling of power.
I thought you would like this.
Will to power, I love it. Or power itself. What is bad? Everything stemming from weakness. What is happiness? The feeling that power is growing, that some resistance has been overcome. Not contentedness, but more power. Not peace, but war. Not virtue, but prowess. Virtue in the style of the Renaissance. Virtue. Moraline free virtue. The weak and the failures should perish. First principle of our love of humanity, and they should be helped to do this. What is more harmful than any vice? Active pity for all failures and weakness. Christianity.
Bam.
So defining Christianity as the active pity for all failure and weakness. And then he goes on to talk about how pity is this extremely destructive negative force that is inherent to Christianity.
Yes, pity is
so what's interesting is he sounds like Hoppe here, or Rose Wilder Lane, or Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you could almost swap in capitalism and socialism here. And he sounds like Hoppe in the idea of the private government is going to seek to do things that will benefit that privately owned kingdom or society, and the publicly owned government will actually seek to do things that will hurt it. And so the idea of prioritizing weakness and prioritizing pity over overcoming difficulties and growing in strength and in ability and things like that.
Yes. No, I agree. I think that's all jives with my understanding, and yeah, I mean, so there. Well, what did you think about his attack on the priest?
What do you mean? What section?
Well, I mean, so I guess it starts in section 8.
Mm-hmm.
He starts by talking about how theologians are idealists.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess more about, I make war in chapter 9. I make war on this theologian instinct.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the priestly instinct. I have found traces of it everywhere. And then if you go down a little bit, what a theologian feels to be true must be false. This provides almost a criterion for truth. It is his deepest instinct of self-preservation which forbids any part of reality whatever to be held in esteem or ever spoken of. So, and then, it goes on to talk about how this is essentially because Christianity, in section 15, Christian morality and religion don't traffic with reality.
Right.
And that's essentially why he hates it so much, and why he hates the priests so much, because they don't traffic in reality. In Christianity, neither morality nor religion come into contact with reality at any point. Nothing but imaginary causes,
right?
God, soul, ego, spirit, free will, or unfree will. Nothing but imaginary effects. A traffic between imaginary beings and imaginary natural science, misunderstandings, interpretations, an imaginary psychology. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up with all these parentheses. An imaginary
that was
teleology.
A hard one. Mm-hmm.
This pure fictitious world is distinguished from the world of dreams very much to its disadvantage by the fact that the latter mirrors actuality while the former falsifies, disvalues, and denies actuality. Once the concept nature had been devised as the concept antithetical to, quote, God, natural had to be the word for reprehensible. This entire fictional world has its roots in hatred of the natural. Mm-hmm. It is the expression of a profound discontent with the actual.
Yes.
And this is why I think Christianity is leaning into consciousness, is about leaning into consciousness, and why I also think that you get things like postmodernism come out of Christian nations, where you sort of get a breakdown of reality because it is a hyper-conscious religion which traffics in the not real, i.e. your projections, your mind. So, of course, it's going to try to become more and more detached from reality. Mm-hmm. That's a little bit of a tough one, but I don't know. I think it makes sense.
Well, can you lay it out a little bit more linearly?
So the mind is by almost definition not reality. Like when you're imagining things. I mean, we obviously we perceive reality in the waking moment or whatever, but most of where our, I guess, head traffics, our brain traffics, is in not reality. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about how Christianity is leaning into consciousness, and so it almost feels like it's leaning into not reality, and so it would make sense that Nietzsche is pointing out how Christianity is a religion that's divorced from reality. Mm-hmm. Because it's a religion of hyper consciousness.
Do you think Nietzsche is saying it's a religion of hyperconsciousness, or are you adding that in?
I'm adding that.
Okay.
Sorry. But I think he actually, he's not clear about this. And
Right.
this is my bent with Nietzsche and everybody, but not really a bent. With you too,
Yeah.
Mr. Antushka. I think that he confuses it because he talks. Anyway, there's a point where he talks about how Christians hate the mind, and I don't think that's true. I think they like the mind. But anyway, that's one way where he's clearly not talking about it in the same way that I am.
Right.
That's at the end in like the section 20. He talks about how Christians hate the mind. And Buddhists love it or something.
Right, but Buddhism is also nihilistic.
Buddhism is also nihilistic, but
Right.
it's more real.
Right.
And that's why he likes it.
Yeah.
And they're both decadent. I think that was how he described it in my translation. They were both religions of decadence because they're and decadence is, I think he said it's weakness, right?
Yeah, I have a question at the top of my notes that is what does Nietzsche mean by decadence? Probably
he defines
decadence.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. He defines it at one point.
Probably. Yeah.
I understand depravity as will already have been guessed in the sense of decadence. My assertion is that all the values in which mankind at present summarizes its highest desideratum are decadent values. Why
Right.
did they use
What's interesting, though, is I feel like he's using decadence in a way that would be unusual because he places the restrictions of Christianity in a place where actually they're creating decadence through their sort of bodily restrictions against like hedonistic pleasure. There's something about pleasure and fun. I don't remember which section. Maybe I can find it. But and he's saying that is actually what's creating decadence, but actually serving your own interests is not what creates decadence. And so that's why I have this note about what does he mean by decadence, because to me that's sort of flipping on its head what we tend to, in general speak, think of decadence.
Yes, I agree. It's a little bit of a double think of it.
I had this. So the biggest confusion I had reading this whole thing is I feel like I agreed basically with most of his conclusions, but I get a little lost in his reasoning. And so, if we go back to sections 8 and 9, my summary of section 8 is basically that there's no such thing as wicked as a pious person. And it makes me think of like Moliere's Tartuffe or something like that, where, theologians, priests, learned people who claim to have sort of special knowledge from on high, these are the most wicked people because they are serving some sort of power other than what they claim to be serving, which is then kind of the idea that I get out of 9. The note that I have on section 9, the idea of theologians turning true and false on their head makes me think of modern landscapes of discourse, and like when you look through corporate media stories about politics, it seems like what they're telling you is exactly the opposite of what you think to be true or something like that. That's kind of what I was imagining how he was seeing this landscape, that people are stating things and he thinks that the exact opposite is true. What I don't understand is how by virtue of them being who they are, they're flipping true and false. Because I can imagine somebody seeking power over truth and then using that to their advantage. But then sometimes they're going to say true things and sometimes they're going to say false things based on what is going to get them more power.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of talked about that actually in the Machiavelli episode.
Yeah, maybe. It seems Machiavellian.
Yeah. Well, so I think I'm understanding, but I was a little confused by the. So you're saying, how do you think it's like the landscape of today? You were saying in flipping things on their head.
I'm saying that I have an experience sometimes where I'm watching the news, and they're like analyzing some political thing.
I don't know if I've had that experience, and it's the complete opposite.
Yeah,
than
like what
think?
they're saying feels completely wrong. So, example, they say, like, unemployment is high because minimum wages are too low, and so people don't want to work. And then in my mind, it's like it's the exact opposite. Unemployment is high because minimum wage is way too high. And that's what I'm saying. Like, they're saying a statement that in my mind is absolutely false. But because they are an economist on MSNBC, they're being seen as an authority on the matter.
Right.
And so
it's extending value judgment.
Right. So what I'm confused about or curious about with respect to Section 9 is when he says that these theologians end up in a situation where true and false are flipped on their heads. So the statements of these theologians are purported to be true, but sort of must be false, according to Nietzsche. By definition, are false. And that's where I don't understand how that's even possible. If what they're doing is they're aiming for power, they're going to say some true things and some false things. They're not going to say 100% false things.
No.
At least they're not definitionally going to say 100% false things.
Yeah, no, I think this was where you're being too exact with it, potentially.
Sure.
Yeah, because, I mean, so... Yeah, I mean, of course, the person is probably going to say some true things some of the time.
Right.
Right? To be a person in society, you have to have some honesty. I think he's mostly talking about it with respect to the moralities that they're preaching about.
Right.
I think that's where he's talking about the priest, where it's like anything that they say is true, it's probably the other way, because it's getting back to that idea of Christianity flipping on its head and raising up weakness and not power, basically.
Right. So when they say the meek shall inherit, Nietzsche goes, no, they're definitely not inheriting anything.
They're not inheriting. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Which is, again, how you see like caricatures of this in people like Bap, right?
Bap?
That guy that I sent you, I showed you.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. But he wrote a book. It was basically Nietzsche. It was basically Nietzsche.
Nice.
And the reason is because it was all about this idea of will to power and stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I think, I thought that was a funny thing, because I thought, first off, it encapsulated it very succinctly, and it's just another way. He's waging war on the priests.
Yes. Yeah, I get it.
I think
he's saying everything they say is a lie, and he doesn't mean literally every utterance that comes out of their mouth. He means that the entirety of their point of view is false.
Yeah.
And negative.
I think you bringing up the sort of news anchor thing is interesting, though, because I think it does kind of work with what he's saying, and that they have become kind of like priestly people, though.
Right. These disseminators of information who at least 20 years ago were considered sort of these reputable sources of information that people looked to gain knowledge of what was going on.
Yes. And I was just trying to see if there was anything else to read on that. But I think I think that covers it.
Right.
At least what I had to say about that. Did that kind of answer your question a little
I think
bit?
so. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. He just had so many good little snippets in this. That's another reason why I like this, because it's just, he's firing on all cylinders,
Yeah.
He comes at Kant hard.
Yeah,
in
so
this.
I had some questions on that. I guess I just don't know Kant's writing well enough.
Yeah, so, I mean, the categorical imperative is one thing he comes at, right?
Yes.
So I had a nice footnote in mind that reminds you of what that is. Act as if the maxim of your action were to become through your will a general natural law, is one of the definitions of the categorical imperative in Kant's Metaphysics of Morals. So, it actually kind of made me think of your friend from Sap and Elixir, who said how if you believe something's true, then you should
Right.
be acting on that. In some ways, this kind of feels like that, because
Right.
it's like saying, don't do anything unless you would be willing to have it be a universal law of yours. I think that's essentially.
That's what Kant is saying?
I think so, but let me.
Right. A universal law. What about contingent situations?
Yeah, act according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so. And then Kant is saying that's dumb.
No. That's what Kant's saying.
Nietzsche's saying that's dumb. I didn't mean Kant.
Yes.
Yeah. Nietzsche's saying that's dumb.
Yeah, the Nietzsche critique, I was a little bit fishy about, other than I think it's the same idea that the priests are using, which is basically they're creating a world that doesn't exist to try to explain away a problem.
I think my understanding of what Nietzsche is saying is that the best thing to do is what is good for you and what will enrich you in your life.
Yeah, no, he does. I'm just saying, what is his critique of Kant?
So that I think it is that Kant is being generalistic to a point of absurdity, where you can't make universal statements of morality like that, because the reality of the universe is different situations will call for different types of actions. And what you need to do is, assess the situation and act according to what is best for you in that situation, not what is best according to some abstract principle. I think.
Yeah, I think that's good, and I'm trying to find a quote that sort of affirms that.
Yeah, I was looking through it too. I feel like the way that Nietzsche puts it is a little difficult to parse.
Yes, very much so. But to your point, in section 11, what does not condition our life harms it. A virtue merely from a feeling of respect for the concept virtue, as Kant desired it, is harmful. Virtue, duty, good in itself, impersonal and universal, phantoms, expression of decline, of the final exhaustion of life, of Königsbergen Chinadom. Should I have said that? The profoundest laws of preservation and growth demand the reverse of this, that each one of us should devise his own virtues, his own categorical imperatives. A people perish if it mistakes its own duty for the concept of duty in general. Nothing works more profound ruin than any, quote, impersonal duty, any sacrifice to the Moloch of abstraction. Kant's categorical imperative should have been felt as mortally dangerous. Yes, so I think that's kind of all getting at what you were saying. Kant became an idiot.
Yeah.
Even for idiocy. And that was the contemporary of Goethe. Can you believe that? Yeah, it's so great.
What's funny is I've had this argument with libertarians a lot, too. is I also don't understand what the purpose of a virtue is if it isn't to serve a purpose that you want. It makes no sense to me.
That sounds kind of like Stephen Fry. Weren't you telling me about Stephen Fry saying
the empiricism, yes.
Yeah.
That
like
if you see that something's working but you don't yet know why, you should keep doing that thing until you find why.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, because he was arguing with like an Ayn Rand idea that, if you see a cancer treatment's working, but it doesn't rationally make sense, you shouldn't keep doing it.
Right. But yeah, sorry, but what were you saying again?
I was just saying that I think I am in line with Nietzsche on this. This is where I think I agreed with pretty much every section in this. I think I go, yeah, that sounds right. I mean, he sounds like Hoppe to me.
Yeah, or I think Rose Wilder Lane with the whole will.
Yep.
And I think this is why it would be interesting to read Nietzsche, because Schopenhauer. I bought a collection of Schopenhauer's essays and aphorisms.
Nice.
And one of them was
some sexy reading right there.
Yeah, no, it's so depressing. It's hilarious. So you would love it. Oh yeah, I think you actually would love it because it's just all. It's just all Eeyore, and for those that don't know, Antushka's other nickname, dare I say it?
That's funny.
Yeah, I won't say. I can't put you on blast like that. But yes, I think you'd find it interesting. So if we feel like we want to just read part of this, like maybe the last half, or try to read just the whole rest of it. For next week, and then we could read some Schopenhauer for the third week. I'm down to read the rest of it. How much longer is it? Like another 50 pages or something? Something like that. Yeah, it's only like 70 pages total. Yeah, so it's not a long one. Yeah, it's like 50 pages, but you see how easy it reads too.
Yep.
Okay, it's like 65 pages, but
I think I can do it.
Yeah, and if you can't, just read the end, like third, because that's really what I want to talk about. He gets in and he has some interesting things to say about Peter or Paul, Saul, as I like to call him.
You like to call him Saul. So there are a few other things I wrote down that I had questions on. So he talks about Protestantism. Being the partial paralysis of Christianity and reason.
That's such a great, description.
Do you have a sense for what he really means by that?
Not a clue. No.
Okay.
Well, I think it was trying to kill Christianity.
Right.
But it didn't, and it just resulted in this weird, hemi paralysis.
Right, the partial paralysis. And it's also the partial paralysis of reason.
Yes. What section is that in again?
Section 10. So he's talking about Germans. Oh, also, there's some nice racism in this too.
Yeah, he hates the Germans.
The Jews too, again.
He wasn't that hard on the Jews.
But he names them once in a pretty harsh way.
Oh, does he? I missed it. Because he's actually he's actually up on them later, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay,
in this.
All right, so he'll come around.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so Germans understand me immediately when I say that philosophy has been corrupted by the theologian blood. The Protestant minister is the grandfather of the German philosophy. Protestantism itself is its... Sorry, I need to zoom in. Text is too small here.
Peccatum originale.
Yeah. Definition of Protestantism: the partial paralysis of Christianity and of reason. And so he's equating German philosophy with Protestantism, which makes sense to me. That's not confusing. It's more the I understand what you're saying with the partial paralysis of Christianity, that it's sort of aiming at the destruction of Christianity. Interesting that it's also aiming at the destruction of reason, because it seems to me to also then Christianity and reason are being sort of placed together after that he's kind of arguing against Christianity this whole time.
Well, yeah. No, I'm trying to think about that because it's true. And it's actually the same in mine. It's half-sided paralysis instead of partial, but it still uses the word reason. Right. One has to only say the words college at Tübingen to grasp what German philosophy is at bottom.
Why didn't he just say that to begin with?
I know. A cunning theology. The Swabians are the best liars in Germany. They lie innocently. Why the rejoicing heard throughout the German academic world? 3/4 composed of the sons of pastors and teachers. I think that's getting at the reason. Mm-hmm. At the appearance of Kant, ? Why the Germans' conviction, which still finds an echo even today, that with Kant, things were taking a turn for the better. The theologian instinct in a German scholar divined what was henceforth possible once again. I'm just trying to see if it... Oh, here we go. Yeah, he talks about reason later. I'm going to just keep reading.
Yeah,
it's
go
good.
for it.
A secret path of the old ideal stood revealed. The concept, quote, real world. The concept of morality as the essence of the world. These two most vicious errors in existence were once more, thanks to a crafty, sly skepticism, if not demonstrable, yet no longer refutable. Reason, the right of reason, does not extend so far. One had made of reality and quote, appearance. One had made a completely fabricated world, that of being into reality. Kant's success is merely a theologian's success. German integrity was far from firm, and Kant, like Luther, like Leibniz, was one more constraint upon it.
Sure.
Well, and because Kant's whole thing is a critique of pure reason. Mm-hmm. That's what it's called. You're right to focus in on the reason part, Mr. Antushka.
It's a weird word.
Should we see what ChatGPT has to say?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, we don't have to.
I don't care what ChatGPT has to say.
You don't care?
No, I'm racist against ChatGPT.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
I guess we can put a earmark that and...
Yeah, maybe it'll sort of become clear as we're reading. I think it's an interesting statement.
Because, is it saying that there was too much reason?
Right.
So Protestantism was trying to get... and again, what is reason? But it's consciousness, right? Reason comes from consciousness.
I mean, going along your point of postmodernism sort of eventually spinning its way out of this stuff, mm-hmm. If we're talking about Protestantism, I can start to see the line from Protestantism to the kind of extremely deconstructionist academic movements. It's not totally clear to me, but I can start to see it a little bit more. I have a harder time thinking like 3rd century Christianity to that. Like Catholicism seems pretty different to me. And I think that the Catholic-Protestant divide has some... I think we've talked about it too, but maybe we haven't. Has some interesting, philosophical, embedded differences that are pretty stark.
Mm-hmm. I think that's good. I think it does come from Protestantism. I mean, again, getting at this point, wokeism, postmodernism, it all comes out of the Protestant Western countries.
Right.
It's like it's not coming out of Spain or Italy.
Well, France.
Yeah, France. Although France is France is Catholic for sure.
Yep.
Although I think of it more as Anglican.
France?
No. A lot of this thought today.
Yeah, maybe Anglican.
Yeah, but no, I mean that's a great point. France is obviously very much Catholic, although they haven't really been, dare I say, Catholic since Napoleon.
Sure.
Yeah, and I mean even in the 18th century, they weren't exactly beacons of priestly will.
Sure,
I mean, Marquis de Sade, right?
Right.
Bring him up again.
Yeah.
Lavoisier, all those French aristocrats, Devices and Desires. Go read that
Such
book.
a good name, though.
Lavoisier.
Yeah.
It is a good name. What about, I mean, all these French names. It's a good language, you know?
Yeah, it is a good language.
Lafayette.
I know. It's a great language. It's so much better than English.
Yeah. White was...
At least English... anyway.
They just didn't have as good of a navy. If they had a better navy.
Also, their counting system is absurd, but...
Un, deux, trois.
I mean, when you get up to like 60, that's like 20 plus... Like 20 and 20 and 20.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
It's so
know.
weird. Like 90 is 20 and 50 and 30-ish, whatever.
Yeah.
It's so strange.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Imagine doing math in that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Fourier, he was a
Right.
good mathematician. Descartes.
He made an interesting point in section 14 about consciousness and miscalculation. I don't think it was a hugely important point to the entire thesis, but it's a point that I think about a lot when I think about AI and computer-generated art and things like that. And the big thing that is different about the way that conscious beings engage in exchange and dialogue and art and all of these things is that there's always the element of error. And with a computer, there's never the element of error. Or error doesn't mean the same thing.
Yeah, no, and then he talks about perfection with Buddhism as the perfection is the state.
Right.
It's like which is the non-wanting. And then imperfection is the opposite of that.
Right.
So I think that jives with that.
Yeah, because he says people used to see consciousness or spirit as proof that humanity is descended from something higher, that humanity is divine. People were advised to become perfect by acting like turtles and pulling their sense inside themselves, cutting off contact with worldly things and shedding their normal shrouds. After this, the essential element would remain the, quote, pure spirit. We are more sensible about all this too. We see the development of consciousness or spirit as a symptom of precisely the relative imperfection of the organization. And I think that's the key. Seeing the development of consciousness as the symptom of relative imperfection.
Right.
Going on as an experimenting, a groping, a mistaking, as an exertion that is sapping an unnecessarily large amount of strength away from the nervous system. And so this has been an argument I've had, not related to Nietzsche, but it's putting this into my mind with friends of mine who engage in like computer music and AI art and stuff like that. And part of what's cool about seeing John Coltrane do a solo, or like Eddie Van Halen, or somebody who can do a crazy solo, and they can do it really, really well with like a high level of execution, is that there's always the possibility of mistake. At least you believe there is. And that B, you can feel and imagine the entire process of grasping that it took to get there. Versus a computer-generated solo that's just as fast, but there was no process of grasping. It just did it, and it did it right the first time.
You went in a completely different direction than I thought you were going to go with that.
My point is that, like, human error as evidence of consciousness is huge, and that's part of what. It's part of why music made by robots is boring, because error doesn't exist in the same way for a computer. A computer doesn't make a mistake. A human might make a mistake in writing a program, but a computer does not make a mistake in reading a program. It doesn't read x equals 14 as x equals 15 by accident.
Right.
It'll never do that.
Right. But I thought you were going into this is showing why consciousness is bad, and it is a disease. It is sapping energy from the nervous system. And but I do see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, so did you think what did you think he was saying about consciousness here? Did you think that he was saying it is bad?
I didn't think he was saying it was bad. I think that he was saying that it is...
He's doing the genealogy.
It is a mistake. It is the error of Christians to believe that consciousness stems from the perfect, and that the conscious beings, kind of like all the things I've been saying the last few episodes, that there is like this perfect source of consciousness that flows into all of us from the perfect being, and that I think he's saying that the source of consciousness is not perfect. The source of consciousness is by definition imperfect. And so the Christians are making a mistake by believing consciousness to be something that at its root is perfect.
Right. Pure spirit is pure stupidity.
Right.
If we deduct the nervous system and the senses, the quote mortal frame, we miscalculate. That's all. But see, that's confusing.
What do you mean? Pure spirit is pure stupidity. When we discount the nervous system and the senses, the quote moral shroud, we miscount. That was what my translation
That's
says.
quite different. But what do you interpret that as?
I think he's saying similar things to what you say sometimes, that part of consciousness is the material being of us. It's the neurons and synapses and things like that. And to discount that, we're missing it.
Yeah, I don't know. So before that,
sorry.
No. You can, yeah.
I think going on to the next, like a sentence later or so, completely imaginary causes, God, soul, I, spirit, free will, or even an unfree one, completely imaginary effects. Did you already read this?
I read it, yeah.
Okay. I think that's getting at it, because it's saying that attributing your consciousness to all of these completely imaginary things is the mistake.
Right.
It's an entirely fictitious world, as he says further down, that can be distinguished from the world of dreams. In that dreams reflect reality. So it's even worse than the world of dreams.
Yeah, because it's completely detached.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's rooted in the hatred of the natural.
Right. Well, and so before that, pure spirit is back in section 14.
Mm-hmm.
We have thought better of this too. Becoming conscious, quote, spirit is to us precisely a symptom of a relative imperfection of the organism. Did you read this?
I'm trying to find where.
As an attempting, fumbling, blundering, as a toiling in which an unnecessarily large amount of. Yes, you did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Yeah, so I think you're right. This is where I'm trying to get at what he thinks so, because he does the genealogy thing. He says formerly they saw man's consciousness as spirit and proof of the higher origin. Now Darwin has shown we come from monkeys and we're materialistic. Because he says that earlier, how Darwin has made us more modest. And perfect man was advised to draw his senses back into himself. Yeah, okay. And you read that already, but it is interesting how different our translations are. The reason I'm so fixated on what he thinks about consciousness is because this is where I think my chief confusion of his writing comes from, and and granted, again, I think are slowly getting a more clear understanding of consciousness, like we're refining it, I think now more than it was back when Nietzsche was writing. I mean, they'd only really just started directly talking about it as consciousness,
right?
But it's this idea of I don't know whether it's good or not. Whether he thinks of it on an idea, on a binary where you have more or less of it,
right?
Because he talks about it like that is, like he does believe that, but he doesn't do it directly. And I also am worried that I'm imprinting this on him because this is how I look at it. But that's what I'm kind of trying to find from him, because the way I have already said that I read it is Christianity's leaning into consciousness, and he gives a lot of examples of why you would probably not want to lean into consciousness, why I think he would actually almost be against consciousness for the same reasons I think Foucault is against it.
Right.
When he talks about, madness and civilization, how, the insane, quote insane, have a different way of looking at the world that may actually be better. Okay, so I'm ranting, but it's just because I'm confused. Sorry.
I mean, I think maybe I'm wrong. I'm reading it that basically he's taking the materialist perspective and saying that Christians are dumb for asserting spiritual consciousness.
Maybe. I mean, that would make sense, given, the fact that he is an atheist and whatnot.
Right.
But for some reason, I just feel like there's something else there. But I could... Again,
maybe.
I'm probably just projecting.
I don't know that that's true. I mean, it's not like I totally get it.
Well, it's also, I guess what I'm wondering, and this is my question for you, is what's your conception what is your opinion about what he thinks about consciousness is?
My opinion is that he thinks it's a good thing. I think he thinks it's a material thing.
Yes, okay.
I don't think he thinks it's a good or a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think that he thinks it's not a supernatural thing.
I would agree with that. Okay, cool. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I also found the Jewish thing, if you want to.
Oh, yeah, sure. Let's get to it.
All right, it's in section 17.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I think that it makes sense to start with the beginning of 17.
Yeah, this is a good one.
It is good. I mean, it's kind of long, but the whole thing's great. So whenever the will to power falls off in any way, there will also be physiological decline, decadence. So that he's defining decadence here as physiological decline in a way. And when the most masculine virtues and drives have been chopped off of the god of decadence, he will necessarily turn into a god of the physiologically retrograde, the weak. So once you get rid of masculine virtues of your god will, by definition, start to weaken. They do not call themselves weak. They call themselves the good. There is no great mystery as to when, historically, the dualistic fiction of good and evil gods becomes possible. With the same instincts, they reduce their god to goodness itself, The subjugated scratch out of the good qualities of their conqueror's God. So this next thing is kind of interesting because they talk about how when these weak virtues are extolled in their God, they can then flip all the strong characteristics of their conquerors as being evil. And so everything strong and productive and helpful is considered evil, and everything that is weak and filled with pity is considered good. It's this flipping. So go down a ways, and this is where we get to the Jewish thing. Because he's going to call this God, this weak God, a Jewish God.
Well, he calls it the God of Israel.
Oh, no.
That's what it says in my translation.
No, further down. He does that. Yeah. But I don't know, like 15 lines down from there. Let's see. So, and then this God, the God of weak, becomes very popular. Nonetheless, this God of great numbers, the Democrat among gods, did not become a proud heathen God, but he stayed Jewish. He was still the cranny God, the God of all dark nooks and corners, of unhealthy districts the world over. His empire, as it was, an empire of the underworld, a hospital, a basement kingdom, a ghetto kingdom. And he found himself so pale, so weak, so decadent, even the palest of the pale would still get the upper hand over him. Our dear Messer's metaphysician, the conceptual albinos.
Decay of a God.
Yep.
God became thing in itself.
So once again, I'm getting that the way he's describing this Jewish God, it's not exactly complimentary.
Okay, so first off, Nietzsche did say he wanted to kill all the anti-Semites.
Okay.
He said that in his deathbed, on his deathbed in the asylum.
Yeah.
He was screaming that. So let the record show. I also heard that he said that Israel has a right to defend itself. Okay? Nietzsche also said this.
Yeah.
So, just so that we get all of our bases covered here, all right?
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of euphemistic language here. Sure. I would agree with that.
Next time we do this reading, you'll be like, don't read this one part. That's pretty good. I assume he doesn't mean Jews by Jews.
Well, so, yeah.
Yeah.
What is there even else to say? You know?
He's just not very PC, okay? I don't think PC had been invented yet.
No, I don't think so.
What else is there?
So
if you just read this, go read The Genealogy of Morals also, because he's also not very complimentary. However, it does turn out that the Jewish perspective has sort of won the West, according to Nietzsche.
yes,
which in a way is not very good either, because then there's other things that are considered anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about Jews controlling everything. But
well, yeah, okay, Jesus Christ, Antushka. Speaking of Jews, Jesus Christ.
Okay, also,
yeah.
Neither of us wrote this book.
I don't know about that. No, I mean, so yes, I mean, so he obviously conjures up that, right, he has remained a Jew.
Right.
He has remained the God of the nook, the God of the dark corners and places of all unhealthy quarters throughout the world.
Right.
I think that's more saying that it came from a Jew, and he'll talk about this, Paul
Right.
and everything, how it was constructed from a person. And this person happened to be one Jewish and happened to be also have a lot of resentment. And it was because his, kingdom, his home had been conquered by the Romans. And that they were also a religion of the lower class.
Of the crannies, the nooks,
crannies
the
and
shadows.
the nooks. Yes. I mean, because it was true. It started as like an underground religion, literally. I mean,
he talks about this more in the genealogy of morals, that this particular dynamic applies to any group of subjugated people will develop a system of morality based on resentment.
Right. But I just need to hang on. So to get back to the Jewish stuff, though, he makes a clear distinction that, and in fact is actually laudatory of like the Old Testament and the Old Testament God. And so that's why it's like, I don't know whether it's a translation thing or not, but I don't think he's actually saying like he becomes Jewish, right? When he says he becomes the guy.
He remains Jewish.
No, but it's not of the people. It's just of a person who was Jewish. That's the point. Versus...
Okay, if I'm being honest, I think he's saying that these are characteristics of Jewishness. Of like, these are Jewish characteristics that this God has.
See, I just don't think he's saying that because he talks about, I guess, the Old Testament and the Old Testament characteristics, which he's okay with. And...
Right. Yeah, I mean, we'll see what he says.
How the New Testament is a completely different thing.
Sure.
It's completely different from Judaism, too.
Yeah.
And that's the point, is this is a critique of Christianity.
Yes. But he also calls, in the genealogy of morals, Christianity a form of Jewishness. The sneakiest possible form of Jewishness.
Yeah. Okay. I don't remember that exact quote. Because the way that it's actually written is important, I don't know.
Right. I mean, we can find it again.
Wonderful. Yeah.
I mean, next he talks about God being a spider, so it's fine. That's the very next thing I see.
But that's not a trope.
God as spider.
Where's the trope there?
What do you mean? No, it's nothing. This is a whole different topic. Nothing to do with Jewishness.
Oh. Well, so what's your point?
I'm saying that he describes God in lots of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he does.
And I
think the point that they're talking about one person in this line, though, is important. I keep returning to that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you're bringing God down to, I guess, the level of the individual and the lowest individual at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you're right. Then he says subspecies Spinoza. It's not looking great, Nietzsche, come on, man. I'm trying to defend you here.
Yeah. All right. So the next section, I have a note. I just said read it. I don't even remember why. Section 18. Did you think this was an important one? It's short. I don't know. All right. The Christian idea of God as God of the sick, God as spider, God as spirit, is one of the most corrupt conceptions of God the world has ever seen. This may even represent a new low in the declining development of the type of God, God having degenerated into a contradiction of life instead of its transfiguration and eternal Yes. God as declared aversion to life, to nature, to the will of life. God is the formula for every slander against the here and now, for every lie about the beyond. God as the deification of nothingness, the canonization of the will to nothingness. Oh, that's why, because to me, that's everything we've been talking about with postmodernism and deconstructionism and all of that, is the deification of nothingness and the canonization of the will to nothingness, for sure.
Yeah. Yes. I see. Yeah. So do you agree with that, though?
Well, what's interesting, the reason I highlighted it is because you've been seeing this connection between Christianity and these modern academic movements, and I haven't fully seen it. You know, like I kind of get it, and I kind of see differences, and I've sort of been in the middle. But what's interesting is his statement of this. That sounds like how I would describe, how he's describing Christianity is how I would describe these modern academic movements.
The will to nothingness.
Yes. And so that was striking to me, because now I'm trying to find your path, like how you're thinking from one to the other.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, because I think there is a bit of that. Because it does seem like hyperconsciousness is suicidal. That's where it ends.
Right.
Because it's a complete absolution from the body. Like I think there's this tendency of that the body wants to survive, and the mind wants to survive. But the mind wants to get away from the body.
Right.
And it wants to have control over the body. It wants to have control over it and get away. And then that's why you see, like, science is all about getting more and more control over the body. And science is an outgrowth of our consciousness. Well, everything is, right?
It makes it sound like cancer.
Yeah. Some people might say it is.
Some people might say, yeah.
Yeah, no. So did you, I don't know, did you like this?
Yeah,
Cool.
It was fun.
We didn't really talk about the Buddhist stuff, but we can talk about that maybe a little bit next time. But
it's interesting, but maybe less important. I don't know.
It's funny. I showed this to a friend of mine who's Buddhist.
Yeah.
He didn't have a lot to say about it. It's just pretty
Did
Buddhist.
Did he not like it? Or?
No, I mean, well, he's Buddhist, you know? No. No.
Buddhists have feelings too, okay.
You know what? So when I was summarizing it before I showed it to him, and I was like, you know, because like how, you know, Buddhists think life is suffering and stuff, he had an issue with that representation of Buddhists.
Right, yeah. Well, there's a lot of different kinds of Buddhism, and there's this weird form of Buddhism I've encountered in the U.S. that feels a lot like Christianity.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah.
You can't get away from it, man.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, we sort of talked about it, but to summarize it, because it is interesting, and it gets back to this stuff about consciousness, of course, that I've been talking about, because everything does. Damn it. Is that, like we said, they're both religions of decadence, but Buddhism is one that comes from a less basic, basically a higher civilization, and Christianity is for civilizations that are lower. This might be in a later part, but I figured we could talk about it now. I guess I thought it's interesting. Yeah, because and so Buddhism is all about looking at life objectively, and it's the closest to reality, and it's about centering yourself and not having any desire, basically, and and really, I think consciousness. I think it's about getting back to the moment, and yeah. But it is a good point that you still are conscious in the sense that you're willfully denying yourself of desires, you know? Anyway, what are you smiling at? You're smiling.
I just think it's funny. I get the sense that we could be having a dinner together, and you'd say something like, ultimately, this dinner is about consciousness.
It is.
Exactly.
Now you're getting it.
Now I'm getting it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then Christianity is about almost like hating reality and so you're getting away from it in the dreams of heaven and whatnot, and the afterlife, and you're also being kept in place by sort of dire fear of another place, dreamlike place, which will go unspoken on this podcast. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We will not talk about it. But even though this is a podcast about the Antichrist.
Right.
But and then again, of course, as we've already said, how it is all about fighting the instincts, although again, so is Buddhism in a way.
Right. Yeah, the notes I have, Buddhism is a nihilistic religion along with Christianity. Buddhism is more realistic, and it is actually positivistic because it focuses on suffering rather than sin. And health is valued in Buddhism, and health is disdained in Christianity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that point about Christianity, like, being okay with sort of uncleanliness and stuff, and
right.
Although I thought it was kind of a weak anecdote, but maybe it is significant. When he was saying when the Catholics recaptured Spain,
yeah. Oh, the showers
that they destroyed a bunch of the bathhouses that the
I kind of get it though.
Muslims had made.
I don't know about that particular situation, but I would say a lot of the more intense fundamentalist Christians I've met are pretty disdainful of things like cleanliness and appearance, and will sort of make an active attempt at being as sort of unappealing as possible.
Well, it is vain.
Right. Yeah. Right. You're so vain, Carly Simon.
So maybe there is something to that. I mean, it certainly works with this idea of, if everybody's, again, I'm taking it to the idea that everybody's equal in God's eyes, which is why, the kings and the lowest of the social strata, whomever that might be, are brought to the same level and judged accordingly.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know.
I also don't know.
Well,
all right. Yeah.
We've probably done
it. That was a strong ending.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. Well, so should we finish it for next week?
Yeah, might as well. Yeah, because it is pretty much the same old stuff. Yeah, there was nothing really interesting on Reddit, right?
There was a lot of interest. There was plenty.
Oh, there was. Oh, well, you want to tell us about it?
So people thought I was really stupid once again. Extremely dumb. I had this one person who kept telling me, like, this is my point of view is a common point of view for people who are uneducated on the topic.
What was your post again?
So I was just talking about Camus and how sort of the greatest art is art that is not in the space of arts for art's sake, but is also not serving like political propagandistic ideology, but is art that is seeking the truth of human experience. And so what I think Camus is getting at, and I the caveat is a lot of our consciousness conversations complicate this a little bit. But I think what Camus is getting at is that the best art is art that is causing some kind of connection on a human experience level. And so the example I kept using to try and illustrate this on Reddit was a horror movie. Because I think that a horror movie is not by definition ideological, and it's also not art for art's sake. A horror movie is meant to elicit fear or disgust or morbid curiosity or something like that. These things that are sort of base human emotions and human experiences. And the way that we are supposed to experience something like a horror movie is that. It's supposed to tap into that and elicit that from us. And it doesn't have to have any political meaning or anything like that. So that was the example I was trying to use. So the most common response that I got on Reddit was that all art is ideological, all art is political, it's not escapable, because anything you utter is political. Everything you do is propaganda for some point of view, which I personally think is nonsense. But
you think that? I don't think that's nonsense.
So I would say that something like a horror movie is not. I think a horror movie could be. You could write propaganda into a horror movie. It could be a horror movie with a message.
Well, I think that they're getting to the point that you can't get away from having a movie that has a message, that has something that a person could deduce as being political, whether or not it's intended even.
Well, I think the intended doesn't really matter. I think you can deduce whatever you want, but I don't think that every utterance is political or every utterance is a form of propaganda.
Well, but now we can get into a whole thing about what is art, and is the person that's interpreting it have any part to play in the art form, in the interpretive side of it?
I think that
Probably
everybody has. Well, yeah, I think that they do. I think everybody has to do with it. But so I also use the Rage Against the Machine, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me, because people bring up Rage Against the Machine as a great example of political art. And I agree, Rage Against the Machine is a prime example of like highly political music. But my argument is that when Rage Against the Machine gets up and does a song about everybody wearing their masks and doing vaccines, that's not very powerful, not because it matters what the argument is, but because that is not a very universal experience. That is a limited experience. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me is a far broader feeling that, you know, everybody knows, or almost everybody knows. And that was Camus' point about the greater works of art are tapping into universal human experience, which is not about a specific political message. It's not about who we should vote for. It's not about what laws should be passed or who should be king or who should be president or anything like that. It's about something, we talked about it on the podcast, about a comedian talking about something really specific all of a sudden becomes universal because all of a sudden we know that we've felt something. And I think it's that space of feeling that is the space of great art. And
yeah, I don't disagree with any of that.
The weird thing about Rage Against the Machine is like I don't really hold their politics, but that doesn't mean that song doesn't get me going.
Right. No, but it gets back to that question though of can you have art, I guess, that doesn't have any political message? That's really what I think the central question is.
Right, and I think yes.
Yeah.
And I think that the horror movie example is that you can have a horror movie that has no political message.
Well, isn't that interesting, though? Because your question was, does art have to have a political...
No, not does it have to. I think that art can have a political... the greatest art...
Has a political...
the greatest art is art that taps into the human experience.
Right.
And is not made for the purpose of political messaging or art for art's sake.
For the purpose. So the purpose is important. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because that's the thing is I do think that you can have art that you're not intending any political.
I think people can read whatever they want into anything.
Exactly, yeah. Well, and I think it might be inescapable, unfortunately.
Well, but I don't think that matters. I think it's like there's something that Beethoven's Fifth has tapped into there's a reason we still remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a reason that nobody remembers Schubert's Third Symphony.
Yeah.
But it isn't even that Schubert's Third Symphony is bad.
It is.
It's not that.
It is.
You're right. It is. Okay, well, whatever. But shots fired.
Yeah.
Sorry, Schubert.
He was a drunk, too.
He was a drunk, too. Right, and you can, if you want, you could read political messaging into Beethoven's Fifth. I don't know. Like, it's not going to hurt it. It's that the power is not the political messaging.
Yeah. I mean, maybe.
Unless the political message is something like way universal. Mm-hmm. What would be an example of a highly political song that's remembered like 100 years later? Like Union hymns, maybe "We Shall Overcome" or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What's the French, the Marseillaise or whatever?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm showing all my ignorance on French stuff this episode.
Maybe some Beatles song, but even their songs weren't that political usually.
So what were some of the other responses that you'd get on this, though? What was the person that was saying this is a common misunderstanding?
I guess they're like some art professor or something. Yeah, essentially they were saying that all art is ideological. And essentially all art is propaganda.
Yeah.
Either for personal propaganda or public propaganda. And I also take issue with the idea of personal propaganda.
Yeah. I mean, that's very much a postmodern, standpoint. I think that standpoint is the same as saying, you can't get outside of your language.
Right. Yes, I agree. Yep.
So, so it makes sense.
And I'm more in line with Leonard Bernstein has a very flowery thing he said, but it actually rang true for the first time. I've been confused by it for years, but it kind of rang true after reading Camus because he said that what art does is at its best, it expresses the unknowable. And, it's kind of like a superstitious way of saying it, but I think it's like the tapping into the truth of experience, because experience exists without language, and language is a way of accessing it. And then art is not language. It's related to, but it isn't the same as language. And it's potentially another way of accessing it that isn't as direct and literal as language.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with most of that, Antushka.
Yeah, right.
Never all.
Yeah. Of course.
We got to be different people.
Of course. Here. We have to? Okay.
Different people hanging out on a podcast.
Yeah.
With a couch.
Yep.
Me. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool, though. I mean, yeah. I didn't really...
It was good. I mean, there was a lot of discussion.
There was?
I stopped responding at a certain point, too, because it was too much.
Nice. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I don't think there's any other interesting things, right?
No, I think that's all the interesting things.
No other interesting things. We'll have Mr. T back on in 2 weeks, right?
Sure. Yeah,
I think so. I'll confirm.
For what?
He is going to come up with something.
Okay, cool.
He's got to come up with something, actually. I should reach out to him about that. Time is ticking. We've got a schedule here, Antushka.
Yeah. And Brother X has got to come back on. He didn't do a full 3 last time.
That's true. Yeah, because you kicked him off.
I kicked him off?
Get out of here.
What did
with your consciousness.
Was I drunk?
Stuff.
What was going on?
Yeah, you were extremely drunk too. Now that you bring it up. No, yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, we should have him back. I told him to pop on randomly anytime, but now we're doing it at a different time. Oh, are we keeping this time? You said this. You need to change it. Oh, well, I guess we can. We don't have to talk about this now.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can say goodbye to the folks.
Yeah,
All right. Goodbye.